So for those of you who weren't here yesterday, and since we did not record yesterday's shir was not recorded, not due to technical difficulties, was simply because I was pouting. I wasn't willing to teach if these guys weren't here. It's not true, but okay, we'll make you feel that way. So yesterday's whole shir was that Rabbi Yehuda Levi explains to the rabbi, explains to the king, that in order to fulfill the Torah, there is a requirement to learn lots of other subjects. For example, botany. Why? Because for the laws of kilaim, which is that you're not allowed to plant two plants next to each other, and it depends on which plants, and so you have to know which plants are kilaim, which ones are not. So you have to know the different species of different vegetables. Right? So if it's legumes, can you do this legume with that legume? You also have to know husbandry. You guys know what husbandry is?
Stuff with horses.
Stuff with horses. Yes, good, very good. Because somebody said, how to be a husband? No, that's not what it is.
That's what I was thinking.
I know. These South Africans, you know. Husbandry is how to raise animals. You have to know that. Shalom. That's the only word I know in Dutch.
What's the new word?
Shalom.
We also have meshocha. You know
A what?
Meshocha.
Meshucha?
That means crazy.
No, it isn't. It's meshuga.
In Dutch.
In meshuga is okay, fine. You never know. Whenever I think I got something, I don't. So you have to know husbandry, zoology, right? You need to know what animals can breed with one another, what animals they shouldn't breed with one another. Right? You're not allowed to create mules. Mules are where you take a donkey and a horse and you breed them together. So you need to know a lot about internal organs of various animals for korbanot, for sacrifices. You need to know them, to know the internal organs for what we call kashrus. You need to know what animals you can eat and what animals you can't eat. And it's not so simple. Sometimes you think fish, as long as they have scales and fins. I remember there was one type of fish that in the water it has scales, but when you take it out of the water, the scales all fall. So then what? Can you eat it, not eat it? What if when they discovered the New World? When they came to the New World, which is in America, they discovered a few animals, such as bison. So what do we do with bison? Kosher or not kosher? Kosher. Baruch Hashem. Why?
The feet.
Yeah, the feet.
And its cut.
Choose its cut. Now they found a lot of fowl, birds, non-kosher. What about, have you ever heard of something called shawarma? You ever heard of a shawarma? Do you know what it's made out? It's not made out of cats and dogs. It's made out of turkey. How can you eat turkey? Turkey wasn't in Egypt. When they were in the desert, there were no turkeys. So how do you decide whether this animal is kosher or not? So rabbis had to know this, Mendel. Long bearded ones. What?
Short beater was the...
Yeah, they weren't. That wasn't the style back then. So the answer with turkey, there was a debated among the poskim, and there's another piece of information that you need to know with regard to fowl. In order to eat a bird, birds don't really have simanim. They do, but they really don't. And you must have a masorah in order to shecht it. There must be a continuous tradition that you know that these animals are eaten. So for example, quail. Some places there was no Masorah, they didn't eat quail. But in some places there was a continuous Masorah that people were eating quail. So therefore there was no problem. Same thing with peacocks. There was a Masorah in North Africa, that, and also the Gemara brings it in Shabbos, of peacocks being kosher, that people ate them. You never thought about it. Moshe is panicking. Like chickens were bad enough, now we're killing real animals. Yes. Yes, sir.
Can you use someone else's Masorah to eat it yourself?
That is the $1 million machlokes. That was a question that was asked with regard to locusts. Because most people don't have that Masorah. But there are Jews from Yemen who still maintain that Masorah. So they can. But so can you rely on theirs to eat it? So I think that most poskim say you cannot. But with Turkey, there was no Masorah. There wasn't. There was no question. Nobody was like, do you remember this bird? We just got here. There's no. And just imagine, how can you not have Thanksgiving with a tofu turkey? What? Tofu should be a crime to feed it to anybody. I'm not a big fan of tofu. I don't mind, but it doesn't taste like anything.
Weird.
It's not normal.
At least it's not sushi.
What?
At least it's not sushi, right?
I love sushi.
I know.
What's wrong with sushi?
It was rabbinic machlokas. Some rabbis hate sushi, some rabbis.
I don't know. I didn't know it was a machlokes. The only challenge with sushi is you have to have a lot of it until you're full. That's the difficulty. That they bring you a thing, it's gone. Okay, now what? Oh, he's making another one. They bring it, gone. Well, and then the wife returns from the bathroom like, "Where's the sushi?" Oh, they didn't bring any. I'll never forget the first time. I think it was the first time I took my wife to eat sushi in Israel. This was 12 years ago. I rented a car, and we drove to find a kosher. It was like a big deal. And we're sitting down, and this girl, young girl, maybe 8, 10 years old, comes in with her grandmother, and she sits down behind me, and she says, "Grandma, don't forget that green stuff is not avocado." Like, Grandma went to town on the wasabi. I thought that was like, "Grandma, Santa, it's kiri. It's an avocado." Grandma, I guess, found out the hard way. So what did they do with turkey, Yosef? Most people eat turkey, correct?
Yes.
Those who eat meat, sorry. We have to be culturally sensitive to those who are vegetarian or vegan, or is there any other terms that I'm missing?
Vegetarians.
Pescatarians.
Pescatarians.
That's eating just fish.
Yes.
And that's not cruel? The poor fish is suffocating. That's okay?
I also don't mind shechting and chicken, I just won't eat it, but I don't mind.
Then why don't you eat meat then?
I just don't like for myself.
Oh, you don't enjoy the taste?
After feeling.
The what?
Feeling after.
How you feel afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. This was a few years ago. Somebody called us and asked, "Can you host high school students, Israeli high school students, for a Shabbos meal?" They want to know what a Shabbos meal is. So I said, okay. And then, but I already put the cholent. And they said, oh, they're vegetarian. What kind of Shabbos is this going to be? What am I going to do? Give them a potato? So they saw the children, they ate meat. It was very funny. He was, I don't eat meat. It's not. Okay, don't. So what they did with turkey is like this. They compared it to other animals, other birds that we do eat and that we do have a Masorah. So if you think of a turkey, if you look at a turkey, what bird does it look like? A chicken.
Oversized.
A chicken. So there are those who said it's similar to a chicken, and if chickens are kosher, then they're kosher. There is a little bit of a wrinkle. They're different species. They don't mate with one another. So you can't say they're the same. But Lamai said that's what one group of poskim said. There's another opinion that compared it to a different bird. Have you ever seen a male turkey? What do they look like? Rooster is the male chicken. No. They look, when they open their tail, they fan it like peacocks. And there were poskim who said they're similar to a peacock. And therefore, that's the way they were matir turkey. So you needed to know enough about birds in order to make this decision. You need to know, sorry, yes sir.
Wasn't there like a certain number of birds that were tame and all the rest were permitted? Why do we need to be comparing?
Well, the question was, the type of birds that were told, they were told these are the birds that are tame. Right? So we lost, unfortunately, the Masorah of what these birds really are. And if you look at all the names, we're not sure what those are. And if you look at the Rishonim, you'll see that they argue about what type of bird these are. So, and when we geographically move to different areas, you encounter new wildlife. And the question is, so what do you do with them? So if you had a Masorah of this bird, and you know that this bird is a quail, or a peacock, or a guinea fowl, whatever it is, that you have a Masorah, then you could eat it. But when they came to America, it was brand new. And they had no Masorah for this. And so they had to make a decision of what to do. And they knew about shawarma, it's coming. And so they had to say, they made a decision that it's kosher. So you need to know about the animal world. You need to know about the plants. You need to know, we talked about yesterday, astronomy, phases of the moon. And about solar year, lunar year, how they interact with one another. You have to know the seasons, rain patterns. And then he says you have to also know music. Not how to simply play music, but what we call music theory. Scales. Minor scales, major scales, all the stuff that melodic, right? Chords, how do that, all of this stuff. Why? He says that's what the Bnei Levi used to do. They had the most beautiful music in Beis HaMikdash. And that required studying. It was very complex. And so, since they were free of need to make a living, because they were living off Meiser, all they had to do is learn music. Not only the theory, but also to be able to play and sing in the Beis HaMikdash. And it was very, very important. And how do we know that it was very important? Because of the two major figures in Jewish history that were top musicians. One is David HaMelech, and the other one is Shmuel HaNavi. So it wasn't just for chumps to succeed in America's Got Talent. It was the most important people of society were doing this. The Levim. Yes?
Okay, question then, why don't we learn it nowadays? Like as a part of Jewish studies, learning.
So as you know in Ohr Somayach, we're Yeshiva for Balei Tshuva. So you're behind 12 years. So we don't have time to teach you music.
Mayor also
Rega, I'm just telling you. So you're behind schedule, right? You have 4,192 Mishnayos to learn. Do you know them already? 2,711 dafs of Gemara. Do you know them? No. 929 chapters of the Tanakh. You know that? No. So we don't have time for that. So now you're saying, wait a minute. So then if I were born religious, then I would learn that? No.
Well, it's surely not pushed a lot.
It's not pushed a lot?
I don't know, from my experience at least, which would be a very, whatever, it's not
Look,
pushed.
we're not here to complain about our parents, what they did do or didn't do.
Of course, I'm saying.
I'm sure what your parents did the best they could with what they had. And look what happened.
Good things. Good things.
Yeah, you're asking a good question. That is the question that the king is asking next. So that's why I decided to just sort of. So what happened to this knowledge? What you're asking is what happened to this knowledge? And how many people, you could say, how many people are in yeshiva learning astronomy? That was Mendel's point yesterday. There was one guy here who was studying astronomy very seriously, and he's, not you, relax. He was, by the way, South African. Very serious guy. I know, okay, shrug your shoulders, fine. I thought you all are one tribe, very close-knit. Okay. So says the king in response to this beautiful teaching of the rabbi of how important it is to learn other wisdom or sciences in order to fulfill the Torah, just to fulfill the Torah. So he says, there's no doubt that in the holy places, the temple, music needed to be studied to be reached to such levels of perfection, because it needed to inspire the soul. Music does that. It, when you are singing, it's mamash lifts you feel special, right? You want to jump up and hug somebody. Eitan. And so, but he says, what happened? Today, in his time, that means the 12th century, who's doing music? Who? Who plays music? Who studies music? It's not the leaders, the most important people. It's the commoners. And just think about today. The top musicians in the world, are they, the most cultured folks? Now you could say, Rabbi, don't be, snobby. Because look at all the wonderful people who play classical music and how they are. Okay, so I don't follow that scene. I don't know how these people live. I don't know. I met one guy that was a very, very famous violinist, according to him. I don't know. And he had a Stradivarius. And he let actually people hold his Stradivarius, which I didn't understand. Like, how would you let anybody touch that? What? That's an instrument? No, it's a harmonica. Yeah, it's like a 400-year-old, 300 years old. I didn't understand why he would let people hold it. I mean, if something happens, I can't afford to pay for that. Oops. What's your name? Butterfingers. So the king is pointing out something very interesting about society in the 12th century. In the 12th century, who were the people who were playing music? Maybe similar to the people who are playing music today. They might be very talented in their, but they're not people that can teach us about living a holy life. Right? I don't want to date myself and tell you the musicians that I know, but most of them were not people that you would want to, spend time with. They weren't good people. I'm not saying there aren't good people that are musicians, but... So the rabbi responds. So he's saying two things. One is, look around who are the musicians today. And two, the nobility, the noble aspect of music among the Jewish people is way down. So yeah, it must have been once in a long time ago, but where is it today? Okay. So then the rabbi says, so what do you think about Shlomo's HaMelech's wisdom? Melech Shlomo was the wisest man alive. And people from all over the world would come to visit his court and speak to him and learn from him. He said that he spoke on all of the wisdoms that existed in the world. Some of it he spoke because of the divine power that he had as a prophet. Some of it because of intellectual abilities that he had. And others is because he had natural talent. I'm stopping on the word natural talent because there are a lot of people who seem to ignore their natural talent. Everyone in this world has some natural talent that you need to discover. And if once you find it and you actualize it and you develop it, you will fulfill the goal that Hashem has for you. But you have to trial and error figure out what your natural talent is. If your natural talent is to play spoons, that's probably not. It might be, worst comes to worst, we'd say, yeah, I guess that's it. That's all you. But that natural talent you use to serve Hashem. Yes, sir.
But how should we develop natural talent? Because whatever we develop...
Well, you have natural. You have to discover what it is and use it and practice it and develop it. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say your natural talent is teaching. Public speaking. There are people who you say, hey, go speak publicly. They can't do it. They're embarrassed, they get nervous, they don't know what to say. There are others, it comes very natural. I'm giving you my example, so that's what I know. And it's a matter of you practice. The more you speak publicly, the better you get. The more comfortable you are. And the more comfortable you are, the more improved you become. And your talks are better. I remember the first time, this was a long time ago, when I started teaching in university. So I came to the university in, maybe a few days before the semester, and they gave me a 7:30 a.m. class. That was, and I was teaching world religions. So I had to learn all of the material, and and to start teaching them, this course. And this is the first time I'm teaching humans. It was a challenge. It was, uncomfortable. People raise hands to ask questions, and you're like, I wonder what they're gonna ask me, and how am I gonna respond? But slowly, as the more you do it, the better you get, and the better you get, the more comfortable you are. Which means then, that's how you work on talent, whatever your talent is. Whether it's computer skills, whether it's, I don't know, whatever you. But that requires a little bit of self-reflection to find your talent. And usually you find out, you discover it through trial and error. You get this job, you go to that job, you take this class, that class. And slowly you find out that there's something that you do better than other people. And then the more you do it, you see that you are sort of much better than you thought. And then you're sort of playing in a different league, and then you realize, yeah, I could do this. So Shlomo HaMelech had wisdom in many different categories, coming from three sources. One is prophecy. Two, his intellect. Three, natural ability. Okay? And people from all over the world came to his court to learn from him. And his teachings were copied and transferred to all nations. To India, to the Babylonians, to the Persians, to the Greeks, and finally to the Romans. But as it is being transferred from nation to nation, says the Kuzari, it lost its attribution to the Jewish people. So it's transferred as if Greek knowledge went from Greece to Rome, without that the origin of these teachings were really already in the writings of King Solomon. And just so you know, King Solomon is around 900 BCE. Okay, and the height of Greece of Plato and Aristotle is 400s, 300s, that period. So he's 600 years early. I remember somebody was telling me about the wisdom of Buddha. And I remember that I said to him, yeah, but he's 5th century. He says, yeah. He says, that's like Isaiah. We go back way, we don't need that. We already have our stuff. There's so many books before this. You don't have to wait till Yeshayahu Navi. We have Amos, we have Hosea, we have the book of Joshua, we have Samuel, you have all these other books. So it's like a Johnny come lately guy. Hey, how you doing? We already have this. So that's Shlomo HaMelech. He says, but because of the distance of time and so many different people were transmitting this information, it wasn't mentioned that this wisdom came from Hebrew. We're only told that it was transmitted from Greek to Latin. Okay? And I don't know if you know the history of ideas, but in the 800s, there was a caliph, which is the emperor of the Islamic Empire, in Baghdad. He opened the first, I'll call it as that, the first university in the Arab world. Was called Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, where they brought books from all over the empire, from all languages, from Hindi to Persian to Greek and Latin, and everything is being translated into Arabic. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is talking about, which means that when he's writing, it's 300 years after. And there was a tremendous amount of material being transmitted from all these different languages into Arabic, and then available to everybody in the empire who was literate and had access to the manuscripts and was able to read. And a lot of these works were translated from Arabic to Hebrew. And then from Hebrew to Latin. And then that's how they enter the Western world. Except for once in the 15th century, the Turks, the Ottomans, conquer Constantinople, which today is Istanbul. And then there's a flood of the Christians who are living in Byzantium and Constantinople are escaping, leaving with their manuscripts and all of that to Italy. And that brings about the beginning of the Renaissance, because they're discovering the new Greek works, and now all of a sudden Greek becomes a very important language. And there's a sort of uptake of appreciation of the classical works, and then they call it Renaissance. Now, all these terms were not used at that time. Those are all terms that were used much later by the French philosophers when they looked at human history. They called themselves, we are the Enlightenment, right? We are the light. So before us is the Renaissance, and prior to that is the Dark Ages. It was complete dark, right? But we are reading a book from the Dark Ages, from the Middle Ages. We're supposed to be nothing's there. There's no knowledge. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Anybody who studies medieval society, even Christian or Muslim, it's a ridiculous concept that they developed, that there's a Dark Ages, and then the Middle Ages, and then there's High Middle Ages, and then you get to Renaissance. Oh. It's ridiculous. The people who lived through that period didn't think, oh, we are Dark Ages. We're supposed to be dumb and stupid. Don't write anything. Yes, sir.
Nowadays we have the 9th century Renaissance and we have the 10th century Renaissance.
Because we go back and we discover that, hey, wait a minute, it's actually not dark at all. There was never dark. So we're dropping the philosophers, the French philosophers' whole understanding of, and then you have the modern period, and then they look backwards and they say, this is the pre-modern, and then now we say, well, we're postmodern. Okay, so now what? What are we now? Yeah. Thank God we have the Torah, and we don't have to deal with this mishigas. That's the plural of mishuga, is mishigas. So, the Kuzari then asks, he takes a turn. He says, does the Hebrew language have any mila, any advantage over other languages? He says lots of languages exist in the world, and some of them are very rich and are much more perfected than Hebrew. And so now we enter the section of the Kuzari where he discusses the nature of Hebrew language, the beauty of Hebrew language, and then he enters into another field which is related, which is poetic theory, where he just talks about poetic theory in Hebrew, which was a very important topic around his lifetime. there is a book written by his patron. His patron was Moshe ben Ezra, and he wrote a book in Arabic on Hebrew poetic theory. It's a very interesting book. Very, very interesting book. And it's worth a read if your Arabic is good enough. If you've got nothing to do. So says Rabbi Yehuda Halevi as follows. He says, look, what happened to the Jewish people and a lot of other things that have to do with Judaism also affected the Hebrew language. That because of the decline of Hebrew speakers and all the difficulties they went through, it also affected the state of the language itself. It weakened, and because there are less and less Jews, which means there are less and less people speaking the language, then the vocabulary shrunk. It had an effect also on the state of the language. So what you're looking at in today's Hebrew is not the same as it was during biblical time. I mean, it's a big miracle that you could take a kid from the street, a native Israeli Hebrew speaker, crack open a Chumash, make him read it, and he'll understand what it says. There aren't many languages that you can do that in the world. I mean, take Greek. The Greek language isn't 3,500 years old yet. It's not. You think that if you crack open a book in Latin and you show it to Italians or Spanish or French, they could understand? No. You ever seen Chaucer, English from the 10th century? You think you can understand? Try Shakespeare. Shakespeare is no walk in the park, let alone if you go even a few hundred years earlier. It becomes very, very difficult. But yet with the Hebrew language, so there's going to be words here and there that he might get stuck on, a kid. But for the most part, the language is accessible. You take an Israeli, you slap him down, crack open a Mishnah, he can read it, he can understand most of it. He might not know the terms, but he can read it. He can read Rashi. And we're speaking the same language. It's a little different here or there, but it's not something that's incomprehensible. And so, he says that Hebrew is the noblest of all the languages. And we know that according to our Masorah, and also because of a rational argument that he's going to bring. And we're going to stop right here and prepare for Mincha.